Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Garain. You can follow all of my content at legendaryupside.com. With me today, Sackreligious. We've got the two of us going forward. Sam Sherman has retired from fantasy football content, but we're going to keep the show going with just me and you talking 4 games, previewing the Week 10 slate as we've been doing all season. We're going to talk 4 games. And if you're looking for additional content, check out my article, The Walkthrough, on legendaryupside.com, where I cover all the games. Matt Irby also has you covered with his Quick Slant article for the Sunday night and Monday night games. But Sack, how's it going?
I'm doing well. A little sad that JSN forced Sam into retirement. But I understand after a performance like that there's nothing really left to do. It would be like if Jerry Jeudy came out and just absolutely did. I might have to just hang it up.
If Jerry Jeudy scores 3 touchdowns and I'm on here with Daniel Raz, no, Sam's having a pretty decent year from a tout perspective. He's touted well, but that JSN performance was too good. It literally chased him out of the industry. But yeah, we're gonna be talking. Let's see, we're talking Vikings Jags today. We're gonna talk Colts Bills. We're going to talk Buccaneers, 49ers, and Falcons, Saints. Those are the 4 games that we're going to cover. And I'm going to be, as usual, playing mostly like DraftKings kind of medium field tournaments this week. Sack is in the Battle Royale Dog Bowl streets. So that's kind of where your head's out a little bit more. So talking weekly games, I think this is applicable to start, sit, and that kind of stuff as well. But hopefully, little nuggets of information if you're playing DFS, you're playing the weekly drafts over on Underdog, what have you. I should also note that not yet, but soon, we're expecting playoff best ball tournaments to drop. So we're going to have a bunch of content on that, written, audio, and then also for Sidekick subscribers, we're going to have you covered with the overlay there to help you draft these playoff best ball teams. So if you're kind of curious about playoff best ball content, if you hadn't checked it out, highly recommend subscribing. Legendary Upside, we have you covered there. But Sack, let's go ahead and jump in to the first game, the Vikings and the Jaguars. Justin Jefferson was the cover boy of the walkthrough this week. I took the layup. I thought about going. With Josh Downs, who we'll cover. But the write-up was it was too bullish on not just Jefferson, but on Darnold here. I assume you're very excited about the Vikings passing offense in this matchup.
Yeah, there are a lot of weeks I do not get your cover boy right if I'm just guessing on it. This one, Justin Jefferson as the cover boy was probably like minus 10,000. After last week when you wrote up AJ Brown as the cover boy, I was like, okay, that's a little surprising, but I get it with the matchup. I had volume concerns, but definitely understood from the matchup. And then this week when you get the Vikings against the Jags, it's like, well, it absolutely has to be Justin Jefferson here.
Yeah, it did. I know. I wanted to. The AJ Brown one was interesting because even as I wrote it up, I was acknowledging that the game could go kind of in distinct ways, and one of the ways is that the Jaguars which is what it would actually happen, is the Jaguars said, "You're not beating us downfield with AJ Brown and Devontae Smith." They double covered both receivers a ton, and then Brown obviously got hurt, which made double covering Smith easier. But they did not play in single high safety as much as they normally do. They're normally in single high about 50% of the time. They're in about single high about a third of the time last week, which left them vulnerable to Saquon Barkley literally jumping over them. So they had to pick their poison last week, and they chose Barkley. This week, it's a little bit of a different setup where they're not going to mess around here. They're going to double team Justin Jefferson. Like he's going to have to beat double teams, but he has been double teamed on 31% of his routes this season, which is 94th percentile. So this is nothing new. This is just like a normal day at the office for Justin Jefferson. He this season has 3.09 yards per route run. He has 3.89 yards per route run when double teamed. So it's helping him. It's just like it's not like helping, but he has not been slowed down by double coverage. Only Deebo Samuel at 5.32 and Jaden Reed at 4.74 are higher in yards per route run on double coverage. Now, this is a split that makes the sample smaller, but Jefferson's been double covered so much that his sample's like not that small. So he's been, I kind of trust that, and also the larger context of it's Justin Jefferson. I trust his ability to beat double coverage, and I also trust that this matchup is just so soft. The Jaguars, they're dead last in EPA allowed to first reads. They're also dead last in EPA allowed overall. But, that double coverage does not seem to be, because the Jags are willing to double cover. They're ranked 9th in double coverage rate. That doesn't seem to be like forcing teams to their second read, or at least when they're executing the first read, good things are happening. So this is, the Jaguars, they don't have a pass rush. They're dead last in pass rush win rate. They're 29th in pressure rate. They're 26th in time to pressure. They're 29th in PFF's coverage grades. They play a lot of single man coverage, which should help Jordan Addison. They play a lot of man coverage overall, which should help Justin Jefferson, even if he has to be 2 guys instead of 1. And, even if they double team him a lot, they're going to hit him. Like AJ Brown was at like 48%, which is like really high, but that's still half the routes where he'll be, potentially in single man. So it's just, from a coverage perspective, a really, really strong matchup for Jefferson. And then the other thing I think is really nice is that Sam Darnold takes a long time to throw. He's got 3.06 seconds time to throw, which is pretty long. It's the 5th slowest among all quarterbacks. You want him to be protected. You want him to have time to throw. They lost Christian Darrisaw. That wasn't a huge problem last week. 33% pressure rate last week, which isn't super high. But, that could create problems for them down the line. Darrisaw was just playing amazing. Going against this Jaguars pass rush, I don't think we're going to have any issues. So Darnold has time to throw. Jefferson's getting open deep. Like, it's just a very high upside matchup.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Jefferson, it's kind of like in salary cap DFS, there's definitely still a decision to taking, like, building your lineups with Justin Jefferson in them because he's very expensive. In the underdog draft style format, it's like, well, if I am, the 101 or 102, I'm just going to take Justin Jefferson. So,
well, is he going? Is he not going 101 sometimes? Like, is Barkley or
Kamara? Well, Kamara is ranked higher by the ETR rankings just based on their projections. Let me pull up the updated ADPs here. So Barkley actually goes before Jefferson, and I get that with the the really soft matchup against Dallas, but again, he doesn't project like the best play on the slate. That would be either Kamara or Jefferson. And then Barkley, just based on the projection. But yeah, I mean, the Jefferson stuff, I never feel like I'm making a decision when I'm picking Justin Jefferson. It's just, all right, this is the opportunity where I get to take Justin Jefferson. So the more interesting way to slice this game on a, from underdog perspective is, are you going to attack it through Jordan Addison, who it's not a state secret that it's a great matchup for him as well. He's going a little earlier than my rankings have him when you factor in projection and positional scarcity. Sam Darnold also getting drafted pretty aggressively by people. Lots of people will just take naked Sam Darnold. He projects pretty well. I've been doing some Sam Darnold with Aaron Jones as well, just saying, hey, the Vikings are going to roll here, just like we saw the Eagles do. And
yeah.
You hope one of the passing touchdowns goes to Aaron Jones there, but you definitely could get there even without that.
Yeah, and I would say, with Mac Jones probably on the other side of the game, that definitely makes Aaron Jones a little bit more interesting as a bet that Vikings control the game. The one note of caution I would have on Jefferson, especially in DFS where you're paying a lot, he's going to take up a big part of your salary, would be that we could see the Vikings run the ball a lot. They've had 61% or lower pass rate in all but one game this season. They've had a tilt to the pass. They're not a run-heavy team at all. They actually have a 4% PROE, tied with the Seahawks for the second highest in the league behind the Bengals, who are at 6%. So this, Kevin O'Connell's he's very willing to pass, but it's always relative to what, you're pass heavy relative to what baseline. And the Vikings have a really good defense. They've been in control of a lot of games. They're now playing Mac Jones. Like, there's a chance that they just don't have to pass that much. So in those types of outcomes, obviously Aaron Jones could really benefit. I could also see that being the type of game where you're happy that you played Jordan Addison, because he's got a 15.7 ADOT. He could hit a few big plays in a lower volume game environment. Jefferson could end up not like busting, I think. It's such a good matchup. I don't seem like busting, but he has to produce a lot to kind of pay off the price that he comes with this week.
Right, and that's the lens I want to think through this matchup in, is that you're paying so much for Jefferson on both platforms that he really does have to pay off a lot. He's going to have to outproduce, relative to his position group, for these guys, Saquon Barkley and Alvin Kamara, over the other running backs. And when you look at the combinatorial ownership, and this is specifically in the Dog Bowl, Jordan Addison is drafted the least frequently with Sam Darnold out of all the Vikings players.
Interesting.
TJ Hawkinson even is drafted significantly more often with Sam Darnold than Jordan Addison. So to me, that's the sharp way to play it. You do the Sam Darnold, Jordan Addison stacks, and just avoid the really chalky pairing with Jefferson. And I guess avoid is the wrong word. Like, I'm certainly happy to take Sam Darnold and Justin Jefferson. You actually can't get it all that frequently. Some people I've seen are taking it as early as the 2-3 turn, which I think is really bad. You take Justin Jefferson in your first round, and then people are just taking Sam Darnold at that 2-3 turn. I don't think you really want to do that. But there's lots of other quarterback, wide receiver, quarterback pass catcher combinations being drafted far more frequently than Jefferson Darnold. Like, the most frequent pairing is happening almost at twice the rate that Jefferson and Darnold is happening at. So it's not the worst, but I think the Addison Darnold pairing is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I called Justin Jefferson the highest upside play of the week in the write-up, and that's why I'm excited about him, even with the matchup not being perfect. It's just like, if things come together, he just has such a high ceiling, where if the Jaguars push them a little bit, right, they are able to they're able to lean on the pass in a way that actually like makes sense within the context of the game. Jefferson has a 33% target share this season. That's 99th percentile among wide receivers. The idea here, where I think the upside comes from in large part, is his ability to dominate targets in a really soft matchup, right? Where they can run the offense through Jefferson this week because the Jaguars just simply cannot stop him. And Darnold is helpful there, but I don't know that it's like essential that you have Darnold if that situation plays out. Like, if Jefferson has like a 40% target share this week and is efficient on that volume, you're going to need Jefferson, but you could potentially, have a cheaper quarterback and maybe not stack him with Darnold in that scenario and be fine. Let's talk the other side of the game, because we're looking at Mac Jones probably, Trevor Lawrence trending toward missing the game, maybe more than one game, with this non-throwing shoulder injury. Mac Jones is going to be the quarterback here probably. I pulled in Mac Jones EPA per game over the last 3 seasons, or 2021 through this season. Obviously, we haven't seen him at all this year, but you get his entire Patriots career in there. It wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I think because he was so bad, he kind of got worse every year with the Patriots, and so it left such a bad taste in our mouths. But he's pretty close to like Gardner Minshew, Tyrod Taylor, Taylor Heineke, Mike White, Mason Rudolph. He's above Kenny Pickett. Kind of in that, like, the wheels don't fall off backup quarterback zone. Now, as a first round pick, potential franchise quarterback, that doesn't cut it, for the Patriots. You don't want like, yeah, he's kind of like Gardner Minshew. That's obviously why he's considered a bust. But now in this context, if we get kind of Minshew-y type volume or Minshew-y type efficiency out of him, I mean, that's worse than what Trevor Lawrence has been, and we would expect from him. So it's a downgrade for sure. But I don't know that it's like absolutely catastrophic for the Jaguars here.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if this just looks a lot like another Trevor Lawrence game. I mean, I certainly think that if you were going to bet on it, you would say it's more likely that the Jaguars have a worse performance with Mac Jones than they do with Trevor Lawrence. But just because it's more likely that he's a downgrade doesn't mean that it's impossible that he outperforms him, right? It's a one-game sample. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if Mac Jones comes out there and outperforms what Trevor Lawrence has been doing on average this season. And if you look at the quarterbacks that you're saying Mac Jones kind of profiles like, and where he lives on like an adjusted yards per attempt chart for this season, if he's in that Gardner Minshew range or like the Mason Rudolph range, that's right around guys like Caleb Williams and Bo Nix. It's not that far below Aaron Rodgers. It's barely a yard less than Trevor Lawrence. And like, yes, a yard less is a decent chunk, but like there's definitely enough wiggle room there for you to say, yeah, Mac Jones could outperform Trevor Lawrence in a single game sample.
When you look at his expected points added per game over his entire career, he's higher than Caleb Williams. He's higher than Bo Nix. He's got a better success rate than both those guys too. I don't have Drake May on here, but I assume he would be higher than him as well. Drake May didn't have enough attempts to make this chart that I put in the walkthrough in an update this morning. But I mean, not to say that like those guys aren't going to be better than Mac Jones. I think they all will be. But he, it was they're halfway through their rookie seasons, right? So having a guy who's at least a veteran, like a capable veteran backup, you can get. You don't tend to get the ceiling, right? It's like the floor is probably a little bit better than it might feel like, is what I would say. Lawrence at times has been really efficient this season against the Patriots. Very limited volume because they basically ran out the clock. I think they ran 19 straight times, I think, in the second half of that game. It felt like the Patriots didn't even touch the ball in the third quarter in that London game. But he did have 97th percentile EPA per play, Trevor Lawrence. Against the Patriots, he was 92nd percentile. Against the Colts 2 weeks before that. The problem is that he's been horrible in certain games. 8th percentile against the Bills, 16th percentile last week against the Eagles. So Lawrence's floor has been really low. I don't think Mac Jones's floor is any lower, than what Lawrence is kind of bottomed out as. It's just that he doesn't have his range doesn't include some of those really exciting Trevor Lawrence ceiling games. But yeah, I think like Evan Ingram's fine here. He's a tight end one in our rankings still. I think Brian Thomas still, a low end, probably low end wide receiver 2, or he was kind of more mid wide receiver 2 before. It looked like it was definitely going to be Jones, but I didn't ultimately end up like downgrading all these weapons all that much.
Yeah, I almost wish that we were getting this first Mac Jones game with a better matchup because, there's a pretty substantial amount of input volatility on the projections for all these Jags players. And man, would it not just be fun to do like a Mac Jones, Mac Jones, Evan Ingram and Brian Thomas stack in like a favorable matchup. Unfortunately, they get one of the strongest pass defenses in the league. So I don't think I'm going to be doing any kind of major stacks or onslaughts. I don't think I'm going to take Mac Jones once in a dog bowl draft, but it's not going to stop me from taking Evan Ingram. He's probably the one that I'm the most interested in, cost adjusted. He like kind of goes before that last tier of tight ends in the dog bowl drafts where it's like it starts to get pretty gross. But he's going right after guys like Taysom Hill, which I do really like Taysom Hill this week, but I don't think he's priced terribly for the spot.
I'm surprised. So that feels low for Ingram to me. I'm surprised to hear he's going that low. Like, is he going behind like Pitts?
No. Pitts goes
Okay.
pretty late. I think the
Taysom must just be
hamstring.
going higher than I realized.
Taysom's going pretty high. Well, and I have Taysom really high in my rank, so I just take him pretty high. But I can pull up the ADPs here and find where we're at.
Because Ingram, I think, is probably the way to play it. Because the one thing I'll mention with the Jaguars is that, you would expect against this matchup, especially with the backup quarterback, that they might pivot hard to the run. But that doesn't really make sense against the Vikings, who are first in EP allowed per rush. They're second in rushing success rate against, second best, first best. So they're an elite run defense. This is not they're fourth in run stop win rate, third in PFF's run grades. Like all the metrics point to them being really good against the run. To the point that even though they have this really good pass defense, we've seen opposing pass rates really high against the Vikings most of the year. 69% is the Vikings opponents' average pass rate, which is very pass heavy. So, the Vikings offense is good. The Vikings offense is going to put up points, right? They're balanced. They can run the ball. They can pass the ball. Like they will put up points on this Jaguars defense. That I feel very confident in. And I think on the other side, like the Jags are really not going to have that much of a choice but to pass. So, maybe they try to run the ball and maybe they have some success there. But I think at a certain point, they're going to be behind and they're going to have to drop back. They're not one of these teams that like just refuses to pass in passing situations. They have at times pivoted to the run, but last week, Lawrence, like I mentioned, was playing horrible football. They had a 71% pass rate. They've hit 70% plus 3 different times. They were also at 68% against the Cleveland Browns back in week 2. So, we've seen them kind of experiment with trying to be more run heavy, but that's more like when they're, against the Patriots and they're trying to like just dominate it and go home kind of stuff. When they're in a situation where they kind of need to pass to stay in the game, they've been willing to do that. So I would expect volume. If you're playing for volume, Evan Ingram, that's the way, right? Like he's got a 27% targets per out run. That's the highest among all tight ends. 26% target share, which is an awesome mark for tight ends. And he's actually been efficient with 1.77 yards per route run. They're without Christian Kirk, who's operating deeper downfield than I think people realize, but still, down a weapon. Gabe Davis, uncertain. And so, yeah, I could see Ingram kind of feasting here.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So I've got his ADP. I'll give you some of the tight ends going around him. So 2 tight ends before him is Trey McBride. He has an ADP of 27.4. After that is Taysom Hill. So pretty big gap before the next tight end. That's 39.4 ADP. Then you get Evan Ingram with a 41 ADP. And then after that, you've got a bit of a ways to go before you get to TJ Hawkinson, who's got an ADP of almost 50. And then it goes Pitts. Dalton Kincaid's got an ADP of 45.8.
What about Kittle and Kelsey?
Oh, Kittle and Kelsey go very early. They're like into the first round type picks. I do think though.
What about Otten? Where's Otten going?
Otten is basically, it just goes Kittle, Kelsey, Otten. Just those three kind of typically they're like in the middle of the second round is how it plays out. Kittle's ADP is 12.6 though. Kelsey's 16.3. Otten's 20.4.
And I think disrespectful to McBride to me.
Yeah, I definitely think the Jets matchup is scaring people away, and also just the no touchdowns thing. There are some times where you can get McBride pretty late. I actually got him. I believe I'm the person who has the latest McBride share out of every draft that I've been in, and that is, let me pull him up here. Yeah, I got him at pick 40.
Damn.
Yeah, so that one felt pretty good. But I actually think the way you want to attack this in the dog bowls, I'm just giving away way too much alpha here, is you probably pass on those first 3 tight ends. Even though they're appropriately priced, the benefit you get from having your first 3 picks be all skill position players, and then your 4th round pick is to pick your poison of a super late falling Trey McBride, and that's not going to happen a ton, but then you're choosing between Taysom Hill or Evan Ingram. Like, I like all of those really well. Now Now you probably if you're like in the middle, if you're pick 6 or earlier, you probably don't get any of those tight ends to the 4th round. So it's more like if you're in the front half of the board and one of those elite tight ends falls to you, you probably just take it. Unless you really like some of the late guys. Yeah, you take it in the second. And if you're in the back half of the room, you just play for whoever's there in the 4th.
That makes sense. All right. Well, now we all know how to draft this week. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me just with the player pool. I mean, Ingram, Hill we'll get to. I think he's definitely going to be interesting to talk through. And then McBride. I mean, McBride to me belongs with that first tier. So, man, pick 40 is kind of nuts. All right. Anything else with this game, or should we move over to the Colts at Bills?
Yeah, let's do Colts at Bills.
All right. So we can start on the Colts side of this game. Flacco's coming off this horrendous performance. He was 4th percentile in EPA per play, which is worse than any mark from Anthony Richardson all season, although not by a lot. He was 6th percentile and 10th percentile against the Bears and then the Dolphins. But yeah, it was a very bad showing for Flacco. But in his other 3 games, he was 80th, 76th, 67th percentile. And he gets a softer matchup. Here, the Bills aren't terrible, but they're definitely beatable in the secondary. They're 28th in PFF's coverage grades. They're 22nd at protecting the splash zone, which the Colts have been effective at attacking this year. So I think this looks like a bounce back spot for Flacco to be able to, at least produce some, production for the receivers. Pittman going to be out. So I wrote this up as very bullish for Downs when I thought Pittman might be in. So with Pittman out, I mean, Downs' profile has been a little bit like I've been trying to temper my expectations because I was very high on Downs coming into the season, and it was a smaller sample. He missed some time, and he's dependent on Flacco as opposed to Anthony Richardson, right? Because he connects so much more with Flacco's that intermediate passing ability compared to the big play stuff with Richardson. But right now he has a 30% targets per route run, which is just absurd. He's at a 27% target share. And one of the things that I think is really, really awesome to see is that Josh Downs has a 25% first read target rate, which is 98th percentile. That is super, super strong. And to me, indicates that he is like very much locked into a role within the design of the offense. The only guys with 100+ routes who have higher than a 25% first read target rate are Malik Neighbors and Cooper Kupp. So this is pretty good. This offense is designed right now to go through Downs. Now you could argue that Pittman will have something to say about that. He needs to get healthier and then he'll be able to, well, he's not going to play. So it doesn't matter this week. The offense is going to run through Downs. It's like, how excited should we get about Downs? His profile on, he's got a 6.4 ADOT. So you're kind of like, what's he like? What's the upside? But, there is another wide receiver in the league who gets open very consistently. Downs has a 90th percentile open score, by the way. Gets targeted very shallowly, runs almost all of his routes from the slot. Downs is 99th percentile in slot rate. Gets targeted constantly, and then produces elite efficiency, 2.32 yards per route run for Downs. That sounds a lot like Amon-Ra St. Brown to me, does it not?
Yeah, you could argue that.
How high do we? How carried away do we get here?
So Josh Downs was like the first, before projections came out this week. That was the spot that I identified as the biggest inefficiency in the market. I was taking Josh Downs in the 3rd round almost every draft in my first few drafts. I think through my first like 5 or 6 drafts, I had something like over 60% Downs or something ridiculous like that. To play devil's advocate, because we're both pretty bullish on Downs this week, but if I was going to play devil's advocate, the Bills do grade out pretty well on defense against first read EPA per dropback. So they're 5th in first read EPA per dropback allowed. And do you think that with Pittman out, that's going to allow them to really, really focus in on downs? Does that stifle him at all, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so they also double team at a fairly high rate, and so that might be, one thing they tried to do. I think they would have to be like pretty in on the idea that Downs is like this Amon-Ra type of, driver of the offense. That he's kind of the engine. I don't know that they'll feel that way. Like, it felt a little bit crazy for me to say it. So I don't know if NFL coaches are going to be like, we have to shut down Josh Downs. He hasn't been doubled that much. He's got an 18% double coverage rate. That's 11th percentile among receivers. Teams aren't really looking to take him away. He's got a shallow ADOT, 6.4 ADOT, as I mentioned. Normally, we tend to see the high double coverage rates coming against outside wide receivers who operate more downfield. That's where you're like, you're not beating us with this guy over the top. That you get the safety shaded over, that kind of stuff. So I think that first read efficiency to an extent is, I don't know that it applies to a slot receiver so much with a shallow ADOT. If they want, I could very much see the Bills saying, what we're more worried about is Alec Pierce and Adonai Mitchell on the outside, and we're not going to let you beat us over the top. Because, Flacco has been decently aggressive, even though he does a lot of his damage on intermediate stuff. They do still take shots. So I guess that would be my pushback. Although, it's a fair point. And the Bills are not like a really bad pass defense. They're just not really good. So we're moving in the right direction as far as the matchup goes, from hard to medium, but it's not like a super soft matchup.
Yeah, the one thing that I'm struggling with is I find it really hard. I don't think I've done this yet in all my dog bowl drafts, but I'm not really clicking Flacco at all. And I don't really think you need to with Downs, because he kind of could just get there, in the death by 1,000 cuts way, where he's just getting 13 targets or something and racking up 5, 6, 7, 8 yards a target. And he gets there that way, which doesn't, for Flacco to get there, he's just a statue quarterback. He really needs to have some explosive plays and a lot of touchdowns. So, I mean, I guess if you wanted to play Flacco, you probably are double stacking him. Like, playing single stack Flacco probably is bad outright. So I would assume that's probably the only way to play him. And I'm thinking through like the draft style formats. He's going to be mostly undrafted. I can check how often Flacco has been drafted at all here. He's drafted way more than he should be. He's been drafted 7 times out of the I think 40 some odd drafts that I've done so far. So that I think that's probably a little bit too much as far as drafting Joe Flacco. 35. So Flacco's getting drafted about 20% of drafts. I still think that's too high. But what do you think about playing it as the Colts offense as a whole is good here, and you do something like a Jonathan Taylor and Josh Downs team stack? Do you think that's viable, or do they cannibalize each other too much? What do you think here?
I don't think they do. I mean, I could see that hitting together for sure. The Bills are pretty good against the run. They're not like amazing, but they do have a good run defense. Taylor's run really well. Some of that, I think, is related to Anthony Richardson helping him out, but Taylor's also really good, and he should get a little bit more passing volume as well. And if you think about like how they hit together, you could see Downs racking up like 8 catches, going over 100 yards. Maybe he gets in the end zone once, but you're kind of like mostly betting on him. It's just like accumulating, like you're saying. And Taylor can hit long runs, or a screen pass to the house kind of thing. So you're betting on Taylor efficiency plus a decent rushing workload, but you're hoping he scores touchdowns and rips off long runs. Downs, you're hoping, is just kind of like the passing game becomes Downs. And so I could see it being very concentrated in that way, to the point of concentration. I mean, Taylor is running back 2 in team attempt share and running back 2 in snap share. So he's also coming off 81% and 72% snap shares the last 2 weeks and averaging 18.5 touches per game the last 2 weeks. So I think, you're just saying I get Colts passing offense in Downs, and I get Colts rushing offense in Taylor. And when a whole unit becomes like one guy, then like you can absolutely play them together.
Well, that's good, because I've been doing that a decent amount in dog bullets. I was really just seeking validation there.
Well, I think that's sharp. All right. Well, we talked about the entire Colts offense, since I think it might just be a 2-guy offense this week. I guess I'm a little nervous about how much AD Mitchell even plays. His route participation has been so low recently. They have not been trying to work him in. I think we could see some 12. Ashton Doolin got a little bit of playing time, although mostly in the slot with Downs' routes down a bit last week. So that was, I think, I don't think we're going to see a ton of Doolin, but it's possible we still see like 50% route participation for AD Mitchell here. Like they might find a way to kind of limit him still. That's
surprising to me. I just assumed that it would be like, all right, AD Mitchell, you're next up. But I mean, if Doolin does get more snaps and keeps Mitchell sidelined, I've got a dynasty team somewhere that'd be really happy to see Ashton Doolin.
I mean, I think it might be like Will Mallory coming in for 2 tight end stuff, or like that might be, or last week we saw Granson. 2 weeks ago we saw Mallory and Mo Alley Cox. So it just, when you see a guy who was playing some snaps in AD Mitchell, and then last 2 weeks he's been at 26% route participation and 13%. He was at 21% 3 weeks ago. He's at 28% 4 weeks ago. 24% in week 5. It's been a long time since we've really seen any kind of significant playing time for AD Mitchell. I think back in like week 2 maybe was the last time we saw. Yeah, week 2 he was at 68%.
That was when Downs was still out.
That was when Downs was still out, right? And he dropped to 9% in week 3, and like never. I don't think he's hit 30% since. So it's. I mean, if he runs 65%, 70% of the routes this week, I'm not gonna be like, oh my god. But like going into it, I would just have expected that, and now I'm kind of looking at just how low he's been. Yeah, I don't think I would be like. I don't think he's even a dart throw.
Yeah, that's a good shout. He wasn't one that I was really considering as a dart throw, but I had assumed that he would probably see an increase in snaps, so that's some good context.
He probably will.
I mean, really though, what that tells me is they're not super excited about having him on the field or getting the ball to him. I think it's just even more bullish for Josh Downs and Jonathan Taylor being the only pieces of the offense. So, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the Bills side. Let's see. I've become kind of a Kincaid guy. I've never thought I'd be a Kincaid guy. But he's back up to 78% route participation against the Dolphins. He dropped off 2 weeks ago, which was annoying. But for the season, he's at 71% route participation. That includes that weird Ravens game where they like pulled starters, or at least him. The week before he got checked for a concussion and missed a bunch of the game, and then they had 2 weeks ago, which I don't know what went on there. He just dropped, I think, to 60% in that game, which is weird. But for the season, he's at 71%, which is still like not that bad. First read target rate of 12%, decent for a tight end. Targets per route run 24%. So he's earning targets even when the plays aren't designed to go to him. That's 92nd percentile. 1.56 yards per route run is fine. Open score in the 62nd percentile. He's not going to be like a superstar, but he does this doesn't feel that different from, TJ Hawkinson to start his career. It doesn't feel it's better than like Cole Kmet to start his career. Like these, Kincaid's going to have like a role, and he's going to have spike weeks, I think. And now is Keon Coleman officially out?
Yes, I believe that Keon Coleman is going to miss.
Yeah, so, targets might condense a little bit. I think Shakir's the safest play for targets. I think Cooper's the highest upside. Maybe they've just got a plan where they're going to like ramp him up a little bit more. He's got a 19% targets per hour since joining the Bills. Could be in a full-time role, especially with Coleman out. So he's, I think, the highest upside way to play it. But Kincaid, I do think is in play. To me, he's still a tight end one, on the lower end tight end one, but he's in the tight end one. Let's see, we have him right now, and this includes the Thursday night guys still in the ranks. He's at tight end 10, so he'll move up a couple spots because we had Andrews and Gesicki ahead of him. So yeah, I think he's in that tight end one mix. Am I crazy?
No, he. I slice on stat chasing. We do like a rolling 4-week average for guys just to kind of see what's been trending lately. And his numbers over the last 4 weeks are pretty good. He's got 25% targets per route run, so it's pretty consistent on the whole season. They haven't been swingy or anything. His ADOT is much better than it was last year's. ADOT's 9.0 over the last 4 weeks. So it's not even like he's just getting the little really short dink and dunk stuff. I am. Here's the problem with Kincaid. He really does not provide any ability for run after the catch or explosive plays. Like he's such a catch and fall down or catch and immediately get tackled merchant. Like I really, a big part of the Kincaid thesis that I had heard was, oh, he's such a good athlete. And when he gets the ball in his hands, then he'll be able to do so much with it after the catch. That's not happening. That's just not a thing. So
he was a little more of a vertical guy. Like as a prospect, he was supposed to be more of like a. He was more in the Musgrave mold than the Kraft mold.
Okay.
To use the Packers tight ends. Yeah.
Yeah. So and he is getting more downfield looks. He hasn't connected on a ton of them. So I think that's probably biasing people away from Kincaid. If he had he's had a couple of these like near misses for stuff down the seam where it'd be like a 30 or 40 yard catch. So those are in there. Again, though, that doesn't really, like, as far as getting a big spike week, like if you get the normal Kincaid production, which has been pretty consistent, his floor is really solid. It's just getting anything above the floor has been the problem. Even if you add on one of those big plays, it's still not that, you add a 40-yard catch. Great. I guess I got 4.5 more points. Like, it's not going to separate. You really need the touchdown here. And I don't know. I'm worried that in this spot where the Bills are missing Coleman, Cooper's still dealing with that wrist injury. It's not like Cooper is wheels up, ready to go.
Right,
he might be okay by game time, but it's still, he's not 100%, certainly. And then we've seen the Bills earlier this season when they felt like they were really devoid of pass catching options. They just said, fuck it, we'll just run the ball over and over and over. So I'm worried. That's definitely in the range of outcomes that we just get the Bills back on their bullshit and they just run the ball a ton, in which case I'm pretty interested in James Cook. This is a film grinder take, so take this with a heavy grain of salt. But the thing that's made the Colts defense so bad is their inability or lack of desire to tackle people, which is a core part of being a defense. You do need to tackle the ball carrier to stop them from gaining yards, scoring points. There are so many plays. If you go back and watch Colts games where it's like, did no one want to tackle it? Like, people just they're not flocking to the ball. Like you'll see with some of these really strong defenses where it's like, oh, there's 6 defenders, or like the guy's been tackled, but now there's 6 defenders swarming to the ball anyway. The Colts are more like that's someone else. Someone else will get it. That's what I've seen from watching them. And even then, when the one guy who everyone assumes is the guy who's going to get the ball carrier, they're not wrapping up. They're just like spearing the guy with their shoulder and like hoping that's going to take him down. And that's led to a couple big breakaway plays against the Colts this season. So I
just checked to see if the Colts play Derrick Henry, because we were already pretty down bad on the Derrick Henry bags, and they don't, so that's good. Because I just as you were describing that, I was seeing Derrick Henry just run for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns against the Colts.
You want the sneakiest play of all time? You probably I don't think you can play this in salary cap DFS. Really, the only place you can play this is the Dog Bowl, where you're at the end of the draft and like the running backs you're picking from are like, I guess Austin Eckler is a great pick here, or maybe I do Jalen Warren, but a guy who probably doesn't project all that different than those guys if you get the Bills run heavy game script is Ray Davis. And I like him a little better for like the tackle breaking, like take advantage of the Colts, like just giving up than I do James Cook. I mean, the other thing that I think is a pretty sharp
He's Singletary, you know, he breaks tackles that way. Yeah.
Yeah. The other way that I probably prefer playing this, though, through the Bills is just naked Josh Allen. Like, nope, you can't trick me into taking 8 targets for -3 air yards Khalil Shakir. Other people will do that and they will nuke their teams. And so then I'm going to be the person playing Josh Allen without a virtually dead roster spot on there. I think that's the best way to play any Bills player this week in the draft style formats. I mean, probably in salary cap too. I haven't looked a ton at what, you know, the combinatorial ownership stuff will be around Bills pass catchers with Josh Allen. But I kind of think naked Allen is the best way to play this. And then if
especially
you're just
in the weekly, so I don't know about it. It's always tricky to play like expensive naked quarterback.
Right. In salary cap, I don't love it. But yeah, in the draft style format, I think naked Josh Allen is a pretty good way to do it.
That makes sense. I mean, you're betting on him to spread it out and then run for some touchdowns, and spread out the passing touchdowns. I like that. And I like the Cook call. Cook, you know, it's not like as awesome as we would hope, but he's been pretty good. He's running back 16 in success rate, 42%. Running back 18 in rush yards over expected per game. He's got 1.32 yards per route run. You know, he's running back 10 in PPR points per game. Like it's pretty good. You know, he's not amazing, but I could see them leaning on the run here more too. And Davis will be a part of that, but Cook will lead the way. He's got, let's see, over the last 2 games, he's got 55% of snaps in each, averaging 13.5 carries and 4.5 targets in those games. So this could, you know, he'll have a healthy workload. The Colts aren't actually that bad against the run. They're ranked 8th in EPL out per rush and 12th in rushing success rate, but they're pretty vulnerable through the air. And like the Bills are just going to move the chains consistently against them. And then I think that the Colts could push back a little bit here too, which even if you have Cook, I think is good. You know, if this is competitive, right, we get a full 4 quarters of production out of the Bills. That's good. All right, let's talk Bucks 49ers. You had some thoughts on the way people are drafting these 49ers receivers. Why don't we start there?
Yeah, I mean, Debo is just going too late on a slate where there's really not a lot of top-end receiver options that are even available. And then the ones that are, you've got them all dealing with injury. Like you got the CeeDee Lamb shoulder injury and the quarterback downgrade with Cooper Rush. You got A.J. Brown dealing with injury with the knee. So there's a lot of guys that normally would be people you would be taking over Debo, where there's either enough of an injury doc or, you know, ambiguity around the quality of their offense with CeeDee Lamb, where it's like, I think I just prefer Debo straight up. So Debo's been going too late. He had a Q tag earlier in the week, which I think was contributing to that. He was one that I was really attacking heavily early. The draft rooms are starting to catch up to that now, especially because ETR has him projected so high. So you'll get people that are just taking him where ETR has him projected, which would be like probably the 5th or 6th best overall player on the slate. The interesting thing, though, and the spot that I attacked really early in the week with no projection was I thought that Ricky Pearsall might be pretty interesting. Now, Jawan Jennings' health was a little ambiguous earlier in the week before we were getting any practice reports. He looks like he should be good to go. So it sours me a little bit on Pearsall. But if you look at the rate that these guys are being drafted, Jawan Jennings is drafted in above 90% of drafts. So he's basically being taken every single draft. And I think he's a good pick still. But Pearsall is being taken at about half that clip. And so I think there's enough ambiguity there. You know, we haven't seen those guys get to operate together when healthy. And if you just want to lean into, hey, Pearsall is a first-round draft pick, you know, he's running like over 70% of the routes the last 2 weeks, coming off the bye, I wouldn't be surprised if Pearsall ended up getting a decent amount of work this week. And the touchdown stuff is just always so volatile, and the 49ers can just score. They will score the ball. And so it's like, all right, I'm dealing with a team that's going to have a really high touchdown rate. If I just pick the guy who, yeah, he's got a lower touchdown rate than Kittle and Debo and CMC, but like, it's very possible that Pearsall gets in the end zone, and being basically drafted only in half the drafts and, you know, decent. I just think it's a decent spot here for him. And it wouldn't be super surprising if he's usurping Juwan Jennings. Not that Jennings has been good, but it wouldn't surprise me if the 49ers really want to try and get Pearsall going, just so they feel more comfortable heading into the playoffs. Like, as the 49ers, now that you are down Ayuk, you really want to know that, hey, if Jennings is out, we can feel good about running out Pearsall and Debo as our top 2 wide receivers, or, you know, we can run a 3 wide receiver set with Pearsall and Jennings and Debo and feel good about that. So I think it's, I mean, they obviously are going to do what gives them the best chance to win the game, but I think Pearsall's interesting at the very least this week.
I think Pearsall's interesting. I also think Jennings is pretty interesting, especially, you know, like, he's getting drafted, so maybe not so much in the weekly games, but I mean, what he did earlier this season when given opportunity was just insane. And, you know, that, like, it has changed my opinion of him a little bit. I just didn't think like that was in his range, and it is, you know? So now, not that I expect anything like that from him, like, ever again, but obviously with that game in the sample, his numbers look really, really strong. And Pearsall, I think more importantly, hasn't really flashed yet. He's at 1.07 yards per route run. You know, it's just tough for me to, like, to me, Jennings, there's slack to be picked up, and there's a guy who picked up slack incredibly well earlier in the season, available and looking like he's good to go. And so I would anticipate my lean would be that Jennings has a meaningfully bigger role here. But we'll see. I mean, to your point though, it's going to be difficult to predict where these touchdowns go. Debo is a really strong play. Kittle is a really strong play, but I could see it flowing through one of the other 2 guys. So Pearsall and Jennings, I think, are both interesting. But that's not to say I don't like Samuel and Kittle. I mean, this, you know, to zoom out, the Buccaneers are 30th in dropback success rate against, 26th in EPL over dropback. The 49ers are going to move the ball here. They have McCaffrey back. That should help in a number of ways. I think it'll help. One of the things that's been weird about Purdy this year is he has a 3.08 second time to throw, which is really slow. Traditionally, when you look at Purdy, what you see is like he's one of these guys who's feasting on first read throws. A high percentage of his attempts are on first reads or screens. You know, kind of like, you know, easy button stuff. He's a lot of design stuff. That's not been the case this year, like, at all. He's at 51% of his passes are either first read or screens, which is the same rate as Justin Fields. Listen, like, he's not playing like the style that we're used to with him. He's not playing that way. He's holding the ball a long time. He's letting things develop a little bit more. He hasn't been like just getting the ball out as the play's designed. That's how it goes. Purdy's just out there as an extension of Shanahan. Like, that just hasn't been true this year. Maybe it's more true with McCaffrey back, but McCaffrey's first read stuff wasn't super high. His quick throws aren't super high. I think it'll be a little bit of a nudge in that direction. But, you know, if Purdy's out there kind of scrambling around and making things happen, then it's going to be a little bit tougher to predict where it will ultimately end up going. At the same time, I think they're going to have success here. So I would, if I'm building a portfolio in weekly games, which I probably won't be doing because I never seem to find the time to draft them, but I'd probably just be making sure I have all these 49ers mixed in. Is that how you're playing it?
Yeah, I've got Christian McCaffrey is the one that I probably have the least of. I'm doing a good amount of Kittle and Debo and then I've sprinkled in some Pearsall and Jennings. CMC is pretty expensive, and I mean he should be, but I'm not entirely convinced that they want to get him in there and just immediately slam him with his typical workload. If I was really hoping we'd have some clarity on Mason. I wanted to know if Mason was going to miss, because if he does, and again, like a big function or a big reason why some of these really gross plays are more viable this week is you just have fewer games on the slate, right? And especially when you're in the 12 team format like the Dog Bowl, the player pool gets thin really fast. And so if I knew today that Mason was missing, I'd kind of be interested in a little Isaac Garendo. Like if the game gets out of hand, they're not going to have CMC in there for garbage time, you know? And the 49ers coming off a bye against Tampa, who it seems like teams are just putting up points at will on Tampa. And Tampa's able to fire back, which makes for good games. But, you know, I could see this game getting out of hand where they just don't need to inundate CMC with all this extra work. And they just, you know, throw Garendo in for cleanup duty. And he's been explosive. You know, he's able to take one to the house. So that would be interesting. I'm not doing it right now. If we know that Mason is out, maybe I would just sprinkle like one or two teams in a pretty decent sized portfolio. But yeah, for the most part, Debo and Kittle are the two that I'm attacking heavily. I was really attacking Purdy heavily before projections came out because I thought he'd probably be either the third or fourth highest projected quarterback on the slate. And that is, I believe that's how it is shaking out right now. Yeah, he's the third highest projected quarterback on the slate, or actually second in raw projection, but I've got a blend of ceiling and median that I use. So he's second in raw projection. The only guy projecting higher than him might not play this week, or if he does play, is going to be limited in Jalen Hurts, where you know they just let slip that Jalen Hurts has this ankle injury that he's dealing with, which also went unreported on the injury report. Good job, Eagles. I wonder if they'll end up getting fined for that. But anyway.
I want more. I want more fines in the game. There's a lot riding on all of this information being public as it is intended to be. They need to get this buttoned up.
Yeah.
So Jaden Daniels, I guess. Is Jaden Daniels? No, he's on the slate. So
yeah, he's right below Purdy from a median projection, and then from a ceiling projection, he does project higher.
Okay.
Yeah, the ceiling projection goes Hurts, Daniels, Purdy with a higher ceiling than Josh Allen and a higher median than Josh Allen. So definitely.
I'm going to go ahead and take Josh Allen's ceiling if it's all right with you.
Well, the problem is you got to pay for it. You're taking Josh Allen in the first, and I was getting Purdy sometimes in the fourth round. So
well, I know. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah.
No, it's a great spot for Purdy for sure. What about on the Bucs side? I mean, my read on it was like it's kind of Kate Otten, and then who cares? But that it has been very impressive the way Mayfield has played without Evans and Godwin. Evans likely to be out again this week. He's last 2 weeks, 67th percentile in EPA per play and 69th percentile. So totally fine. Bucs have had 73% and 68% pass rates. So they're just like if you just didn't know that Godwin and Evans are out and you just look at like Baker's numbers, the Bucs, like the way they're attacking these games, you wouldn't really have any idea that they lost their two, like not just best receivers, but like the whole offense has been running through these guys, and they really haven't missed a beat in terms of the efficiency and the pass rates. Now, Kate Otten's been a huge part of that. He's up to a 20% target share now for the season, which is 91st percentile among tight ends for the season. And that understates how big the last couple of weeks have been. Last 2 weeks, 9, 81, and 2 on 11 targets, 8, 77, and 1 on 10 targets. I mean, obviously, he's kind of the engine of the offense right now. Really, really strong tight end play. But thoughts on where you would be taking him? You mentioned kind of skipping this top tier of tight ends in your weekly drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a decent amount of Otten. I can look how much. Yeah, I mean, I've got 20% Kate Otten because sometimes he just falls too far. He does project very well. The one thing, and this is more like narrative-y, that I would be a little concerned about for Kate Otten is, he is going to be operating where he's very likely going to be covered by Fred Warner, who's been one of, if not the best defensive player in the league. And so that's a little concerning. But I mean, it's if the Bucks can't connect with Kate Otten, then the Bucks are just not moving the ball. you know, um, as far as like other Bucks options, both of the running backs, Bucky and Rashad White, go very late. They're like last round picks. It's tough. I wish if Bucky didn't have the toe injury, I'd be slamming Bucky here because it seems like the Bucks know that Rashad White is not a very good rusher. I believe they only gave him 3 attempts last week. So
He's getting a lot of snaps though.
he's getting snaps. Yeah, but
yeah, so it hurts Bucky.
It does hurt Bucky, and I think that a big part of that too is that Bucky's not fully healthy. If he was fully healthy, maybe he's able to start encroaching on some of that snap share. He's not, and they've said the toe is going to be something he deals with the entire season. He looked less explosive and bursty to me last week. Again, that's one game. I don't want to and it's a film grinder take. Like I don't really want to lean too much on that. It could have just been fluky, or I could just be wrong, But I think the toe is certainly hampering him. But I have mixed in him and I've mixed in Rashad White. Really, the Rashad White thing. I mean, Bucky's just making it so messy now, even though to play White, because Bucky's getting involved in the passing game too. It's not like, oh, well, Rashad's just going to be our passing role guy. And so you feel more confident going to him if you think that the 49ers are going to roll here. It's like, man, it just might be so gross that they cannibalize each other and no one's really playable. That's how I lean. But again, the slate is just so thin with the options that you have that I was taking those guys. Now I'm not really clicking them. I'd prefer to do like an Austin Eckler. What do you think about doing like Jalen Warren versus the Bucks running backs?
I'm not actually, unfortunately, I'm not that excited about Warren this week. Patterson, I think, will be back, and it's Arthur Smith that he showed his might. Patterson's going to have 10%, 15% of the snaps, which is just so brutal, but it is going to happen. And then Harris is run pretty well. He's running back 14 in rush yards over expected per game. And Warren, I thought to my eyes, looked better in his most recent game, but the numbers we have for him for the season are terrible. Running back 41 in rush yards over expected per game with a 24% success rate, which is horrendous. Harris is only at 35%, which is also bad, but still significantly better than Warren. So it's not like Warren is flashed. As someone who drafted a ton of Warren in best ball, and if I'm going to make the bull case there, I'd be like, look, he wasn't healthy. He's coming off the bye. He's going to flash a little bit more this week, and by the time we get to the fantasy playoffs, he's going to be someone that you'd actually be happy to have advanced, even though it will have been hard to advance him, right? But for this week, is Warren going to come out and have a big role? I don't know. To the extent that the Steelers are self-scouting here, I would assume that they lean on Harris. Harris is running pretty well. He is kind of the status quo guy, so why wouldn't they just kind of keep rolling with him? So I probably go both Bucks backs fairly comfortably over Warren.
Okay. Travis Etienne or either Bucks back?
Probably both Bucks backs.
Yeah.
Etienne did. I mean, I don't. He's basically Jalen Warren now.
Yeah. It does seems pretty Jover for him. And then we did get Brian Robinson missing practice, I believe. Let me see if there's anything more. But yeah,
if Robinson's out, I would take Eckler over both Bucks backs.
Would you take Eckler or Rico Dowdle?
Eckler.
Eckler or Ramondre?
Eckler.
Eckler or Tony Pollard? Tony Pollard also. Pollard missed practice yesterday, and Spears is fully back.
He missed practice all last week.
Yeah.
And still got a big workload. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. I would take. I mean, we'll see, but I would take Pollard
Okay.
unless there's reports he's going to be limited.
Okay.
I'm not worried about Spears. Spears has not been good this year. Pollard has been pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Anything else to talk in this game, or we probably should move on to the final game. Talk Falcons Saints. So, all right, give me the Taysom Hill bull case because I know you're excited about him.
I mean, he projects better than a lot of the wide receivers that are going around him. He's the running back 2 on the team, more or less. Certainly in like the high leverage spots right now. Here's the problem. A lot of the high leverage spots for the Saints are we really need to convert this 3rd and inches, or we need to convert this 4th and inches. And so that's not going to get you any fantasy points. What you really need is you need the Saints on the goal line. And now Taysom Hill was brought in on the goal line a couple times, or in the green zone. He took some snaps at quarterback, more like Wildcat with how they deployed him there. You have so much touchdown potential for Taysom. Like the touchdown upside is pretty huge. He definitely can have a 2 touchdown game. So that's always.
What does he have in addition to that? Like my thing with Taysom is that
I'm getting there.
Okay,
so,
all right.
So he has the touchdown upside. He's always had that. But now, who are the Saints? Can you even name the 3rd pass catching option on the Saints? And you can't say Taysom Hill or Alvin Kamara. Who's the 3rd pass catcher not named Taysom Hill?
So Juwan Johnson?
Is he healthy? Is he going to play?
He played 74% route participation last week. I thought he was playing. He
was banged up. Let me see. Okay, I don't see anything on injury report for him. He was banged up though. So okay, you get Juwan Johnson.
Nothing on the injury report. Yeah, I think he's good to go. I think.
All right, Juwan Johnson. Who else?
So Mason Tipton.
Great. Okay.
Oh my God, they have Marcus Valdes-Scantling?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Like it's Mason Tipton. Yes.
When did that happen?
So Mason Tipton is their best receiver, and then you have Juwan Johnson, who, like, he'll definitely get more work, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Taysom is going to do a lot this game. Is what I'm saying. Like he has the upside to be running a lot more routes than he typically does. And they will use him on more routes. Like earlier in the season, when they've had injuries to pass catchers and Johnson wasn't as healthy, they were using a lot more Taysom. And he's not like calling Taysom a tight end it's not what he does. Like he's never really playing tight end.
Running back.
Yeah, he's a running back, but he also
he's a wildcat running back.
Yes. Yeah. But he also will line up out wide and run routes. Like let me pull up.
Fair enough.
Because I was looking at where he lines up, and yeah, he's just lining up all over. I want to pull this up though, because it's worth actually having the numbers here. So Taysom Hill snap alignment by game. So this is last week. Quarterback 4 snaps, backfield 7 snaps, in line as a tight end 10 snaps, slot receiver 10 snaps. Wide receiver, 4 snaps. And then you also get punt coverage and punt return. But like he got 35 snaps on the offense, and it was all over the place. And last week, week 8 as well, 13 slot snaps, 8 wide snaps. Like, and both last week, like, yes, Olave left.
You should put all of these stats in the picture frame and do a Dennis Allen Wolverine just looking. You know he's so sad not to be able to put Taysom Hill in all these different spots in the formation.
I'm pretty sure that Dennis Allen is texting Taysom Hill on Sunday morning. Good luck, bud. Miss you.
But isn't like anyone on the team except for Taysom.
Yeah, love you, bud. But no, I would not be surprised. I mean, Taysom is probably going to be one of the highest snap rate players on their offense this week. So I think there's a lot of room for him to get stuff, and it's so hard to project. You think like Taysom Hill?
Can I jump in a little?
Yes.
So all right. So Chris Olave had 12% route participation last week. And Taysom Hill was at 47% route participation, which is pretty good, you know, considering that Alvin Kamara was at 68%, which goes to your point. You know, he's not just the kind of the backup running back. But Marcus Valdes-Scantling was at 53. Cedric Wilson was at 44%. We saw both some of Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson. So you have some two tight end stuff going on. Juwan Johnson was at 74%. Foster Moreau at 59%. Jordan Mims, the backup running back, was at 12%. Adam Prentice, a fullback, played. He was at 15%. So we're seeing like there's a lot of people, right? We got a fullback who gets a little playing time. We got two tight ends. There are three wide receivers who are running 50% plus routes. You know, and with Olave out of the picture, it'd probably be 60% plus for those three. So, sorry, it was 40% plus last week with Wilson. It's probably 50% plus for all of them this week. I don't know that Taysom Hill is going to like see all that much more work than he did last week. And, you know, he's pretty good last week, but 1.2 ADOT last week. And for the season, he's at 4.2. So he's lining up in a bunch of different spots, but it is mostly like shallow targets and short yardage rushes, right? Like that's what it's built on. So I don't really buy the ceiling argument. To me, you're getting tight end like filled, right? He probably scores a touchdown. There's like a good chance he scores a touchdown, and there's a really good chance he's got like at least 3-4 catches. And at tight end, like that's helpful. But I don't know. I mean, like compared to Evan Ingram, like give me Evan Ingram, man. Evan Ingram could like rack up receptions. Like if he's going anywhere near Ingram, I don't even think I would consider Taysom Hill over Evan Ingram this week.
I think that's good context. I'm moving up Evan Ingram in my ranks as we speak. I looked because I was like, I know Taysom has had some downfield stuff though this season, so I pulled up his receiving depth chart. He has had one downfield target this season.
It really stuck in
just
your mind.
The one. But it was, and the reason it stuck in my mind was it was this wheel route up the left sideline.
Yeah.
It was deep. It was, I believe, over a 30-yard target downfield. Could not convert it. But yeah, he did have one deep target. Everything else has been sub 10 yards. So you're not wrong. He is not getting targeted deep downfield at all. So yeah, I guess really the ceiling with Taysom is like the guy needs 2 touchdowns.
Which is plausible. Like, I don't want to
Yes.
take that away. Like, that's very plausible that he scores twice. Like, I'm not discounting that. It's sort of like when a player scores twice, I want to be like, oh my God, this dude's a smash. And like Taysom, I feel like
he got twice. There. Yeah.
He got there. Yeah. It's kind of that vibe to me.
No, you're
right.
The
higher the price goes, the more I'm like, well, I don't want to have to like pay for him scoring 2 touchdowns because it's not like the most likely outcome, you know?
Hunter Henry or Taysom Hill?
I would take Taysom Hill over Hunter Henry. Yeah. I mean, I think it's more, I think my pushback is more of like a tier that I don't think he's in that tier. Like Kittle, McBride, Kelsey, Otten, Ingram are kind of like, I don't want to hear about Taysom Hill. If we get past those guys, we're talking about Pitts and Kincaid and Hawkinson and Goddard and Hunter Henry and, you know, Jonnu, Jake Ferguson. Like these are the dudes behind that. Like Taysom ahead of those guys is fine to me. That might be where we end up. Any of those guys you're taking ahead of Taysom?
No, the only people that I'm really taking ahead of Taysom are that first tier of player. But I went and I moved Evan Ingram ahead of Taysom in my ranks. I think that makes sense to me, and I've got a good amount of Taysom already. I'm happy to kind of diversify off that. I've got 14% Taysom, and then how much Evan Ingram do I have? Yeah, only 9% Evan Ingram. So yeah, definitely. I think just after hearing your take on it, it does make sense to prioritize Evan Ingram a little bit more there, especially because he's been going a little later. So I think that's how I'm going to try and play it to close out the week.
What about Kamara, who, if Taysom doesn't score 2 touchdowns, Kamara might score 4.
I've been mixing, but the 101 for me this week has just been between Kamara and Justin Jefferson, basically. It's like I want to take Saquon there, but he was dealing with a little bit of an injury. I don't think it's anything major, but they were resting him. He had back soreness, probably from
from kicking his legs up too high. Yeah,
yeah, from putting the team on his back too hard.
Don't jump over guys if you don't want your back to be sore, man.
Yeah, I mean Saquon is a hard one every week because you're like.
Do you imagine doing like if I did that, I would come down like oh.
Oh, I mean that's how I gravely injured myself. Not even anywhere near as high as him. I jumped and tore my hip flexor, and it's fucked with me for like 3 years. For 3 years. Yeah, Saquon did something that literally
highlight if you or I attempted
it ended my career. Like Saquon did it, like it's no big deal. It ended my career. I basically have not been able to play sports since.
Oh God! All right, sorry, I didn't know. There was an actual story. Oh man, what were you trying to do? You trying to leap over someone?
Nope, I was just playing with my cat. I jumped around the corner to freak him out. I like tried to jump really high because he was like low. He's like slinking around the wall. I was like, he thinks I'm gonna like just step out around the corner. So I jumped to try and like really get up there, and it didn't go well. It's like the most pathetic injury of all time.
Well, we're still hoping for a full recovery from Sack. Year 4. Kamara. Now, if I was going to try to poke holes in Kamara, I would say his value is primarily coming as a receiver. 1.83 yards per route run, running back 4. He's running back 1 in targets per route run with 30% targets per route run. He's got a 23% target share, which is insane. But this team has been like very run heavy with Carr. They've had their lowest pass rates of the season are all very low. 42% in the opener, 34% against the Cowboys the following week, and then 46% last week. They're also at 50% against Philly and 55% against the Falcons. Those are all with Carr. So, like, they're not like it. The funny thing is they were actually much more willing to pass when they had the backups in there. If they don't get pushed in a huge way, which I think is possible because the Falcons have been somewhat conservative and get a Saints defense that is not defending the run well. The Falcons over the last 4 weeks have peaked at a 58% pass rate. 48%, 58%, 53%, 48%. Last week, they got that Dallas Cowboys run defense, and they ran the ball a lot. We've got a Saints run defense that's like almost as bad against the run. So we could have a run-heavy game plan from the Falcons. Like maybe there's just not that much play volume in this game. And then all of a sudden, we're talking about how many touchdowns does Kamara score and not really defining his day. From a floor perspective, from like a projection perspective, from a median outcome perspective, there's nothing that you can really poke holes in here with Kamara. He's going to get there. But, like, Barkley's ceiling is immense. And Jefferson's ceiling is immense. And so, to me, in, like, tournament-type stuff, I would be prioritizing those two guys, I think, over him. Now, it is tricky because, he's going to catch a bunch of passes and he can score a bunch of touchdowns, as we've seen repeatedly over his career. So, not to say Kamara doesn't have a ceiling, but when I look at the ceiling of the two guys that are also in the mix for the 101, those ceilings are more enticing to me. So, it would be the hole I would poke is just, his rush yards are expected per game. He's running back 33. He's got a 36% success rate. That's running back 34. He's running back 47 on elusive rating. Like, the whole thing, obviously, took this way too far because he's crushing. But, like, the idea that he's fallen off as a rusher, I think he has fallen off as a rusher. He just hasn't fallen off as a receiver. And so much of the offense is going to run through him that he will score a lot of fantasy points this week. But what are your thoughts on him ceiling-wise compared to the other top options?
No, I agree with you. And Dricko and I had a similar conversation on stat chasing where, just the absolute ceiling for Kamara is certainly lower. He doesn't have that rushing efficiency that he used to have. And so when you get like a true ceiling outcome from, say, like a Saquon or a Brees Hall or a Bijan, like those guys are probably going to dust Kamara. The thing is, like in the Dog Bowl specifically, it's only a 5,200 person tournament. So with your first round pick, you almost like, of course, you want access to the ceiling. Like if one of these guys does hit their ceiling outcome, you're going to need them most likely. But in the event that they all just have like good to even like moderately great, but not like they're absolutely not above an 80th percentile outcome for them, like then you're fine. You're like, great, I got my 20 from Kamara. This team is live. Like the other guys around him, like maybe Jefferson puts up 25 and Bijan gets 22 and Brees is 23. It's like, whatever. I'm fine with Kamara. I didn't get, lapped by the field there. And I live to fight another day at my other positions. And so that's kind of the way that I look at him, where I don't really want to full fade it, just because
that makes sense.
He's pretty safe, especially in smaller field stuff.
Yeah.
But I am like, there are times where I've gotten the 101 and my rankings with the bit of randomization stuff that I do for some diversification will have Kamara 101. I'm like, nah, it's a Justin Jefferson draft. So I have been, breaking some ties to Jefferson. Like, let me look here what my Jefferson exposure is compared to Kamara. I think I was even, and then when I saw that I was even there, it's like, that's not who I want to be.
Yeah.
I would much rather have the Justin Jefferson there. So let's see my Justin Jefferson exposure. Here we go. So I've got Jefferson about 9% of the time, and then Kamara. I'm still even on them. Dang, they evened back out for me. So I'll hopefully get to rectify that today. Get some more Justin Jefferson teams.
Nice. No, but I mean, I get why you're finding yourself taking Kamara. He's got to be a very comfy click, and a good click. So don't want to overstate that case, but that's just like that's sort of the thing in the back of my mind. Speaking of ceiling, I mean, Bijan Robinson has a pretty massive ceiling here, I think. I mentioned the Saints' run defense at 29th in EPL out per rush, 27th in rushing success rate against. We did see them go run heavy last week. Robinson didn't get in the end zone, so he didn't have an amazing game. But, I mean, his profile is now starting to look pretty damn good. He's got 1.58 yards per route run. He's running back 2 in ESPN's receiver rating. He's running back 5 in success rate on the ground, 47% success rate. That's an awesome mark. The offense is shifting to the run a little bit. I could see them running a lot here, especially like the Saints would love if we could just be like run heavy. Let's both be run heavy, like kind of the old school like handshake deal, like the Falcons. It's like who you run. It's like Falcons and the Bears back when it's like Getsy or whatever. They're just like delighted to just run the ball way too much. I could see it being one of those games. It was like let's just be cool, man. Let's just be cool and run the ball a bunch, and we'll win by 3. What do you say, Saints? Saints, great.
Everybody gets to go home early.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I don't know. I mean, Robinson's ceiling, I think, is pretty damn high here. But what are your thoughts on the Falcons in terms of Robinson in the passing game?
Yeah, the passing game is really interesting because you've got the ambiguity of the Drake London hit pointer. I was looking into it. It does seem like it's not so bad that it would keep him out of the game, and it's just going to be a pain tolerance thing. I wonder how limited he is, and there's a chance he doesn't suit up, right? So I've been pretty interested in Mooney. I've been trying to take him pretty aggressively because even if you get London in, like it might just be that London isn't at 100% and Mooney gets to do a lot more. You also have Pitts dealing with a hamstring injury. So Mooney's pretty interesting. But back to Bijan, I wanted to ask you, they seem to have been going away from Algier, not like all the way, but he's just been getting a lot less than he was earlier in the season. I want to know, do you think that's just, the games have been a little bit more competitive for them lately, or they realize like, oh, we probably should give Bijan the ball more? The spot that I think of is back when they played the Cowboys. it was a spot where I really thought like, man, they've been using Algier so much, and I definitely could see Algier getting there too. And unfortunately, I didn't have the stones to do it. But that was the game where Algier went off as well. I'm wondering, you get another.
No, the Cowboys was last week. Which game do you mean?
Or no, I'm sorry, not the Cowboys. I'm thinking of the other shitty run defense, the Panthers. They played
Panthers, right.
So I wonder.
He got there. Yeah, he got there that week. That was week 6.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a chance that we see more of a split like that if the game gets out of hand? And you like, again, it's only really viable because of how thin running back gets on the slate. But would you take an Algier over like the Bucks running backs or no?
I don't think so. I mean, so week 6, Algier had 41% of the snaps, Robinson 56%. Since then, Robinson 68, 72%. And he's been playing better. Like early in the season, we were like, what is going on with Bijan? Like he doesn't look right. And he dealt with that hamstring injury. Like he looks pretty good now. So I think now look, I mean, the game could get away from the Saints here. And I would definitely wouldn't put it past the Falcons to just like salt away the game with Algier. But I think in most scenarios, most competitive scenarios, we're gonna see plenty of Bijan and not so much Algier. It seems like he's kind of taken over the back. I mean, he even with Algier kind of working in a little bit more in the middle part of the season, he's running back 6 in snap share this year. Bijan is. He's running back 5 in route participation. So I'm not super concerned about his playing time. And the flip side of that, I'm not all that intrigued by taking kind of dart throws on Algier as like he salts away the game. I mean, yeah, it could definitely happen, but I think you need a very specific type of script.
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't gotten there on Algier this week. It was stuck in my mind from the Panthers week when I was pretty strongly considering it then and just didn't get there. It's like, gosh, do I really want to watch it happen twice? I'm like, it could be an Algier week, but I agree with you that it's probably just a little too thin. And I think it's like you said, it's more because it seems like the roles have shifted where they're going to use Bijan more than they were previously in the season. So yeah, I'm pretty into Bijan this week. I'm pretty happy to get a pick kind of in the middle of the draft board. Really, the worst place to pick is like when you're, I don't know, like 10, like 9, 10, when that first tier of players is kind of off the board, and then you get like the start of the second tier. But yeah, I like Bijan a lot here.
So what are you thinking about? Like, how are you handling Drake London, Darnell Mooney, Kyle Pitts? Because one thing I would note here is that Saints are bad against the run. I mentioned kind of the handshake deal type stuff. But the Falcons aren't the old school Arthur Smith Falcons. They have thrown at times this year, including against the Saints in the first matchup. They had a 71% pass rate with just a 63% expected pass rate. They also had a 77% pass rate against the Buccaneers in their first meeting. They then dropped to 53% in their second meeting. But still, we've seen this team at times be pass heavy. The Saints don't have a great pass defense, and they just traded Marshawn Lattimore. So a pass heavy game plan here could be quite effective and efficient. So Drake London, with that in mind, is intriguing for sure. And Darnell Mooney, one of the more surprising players to me. It's been a couple of years since he was really relevant, but he has 1.92 yards per route run, which is a mark fully supported by his target volume and a 12.3 ADOT. It's like exactly what you would expect him to have just looking at his targets per route run and ADOT, assuming a normal league average yards per target for that depth. So point being, he's not running hot on yards per target. This is not him just like making a few fluky big plays. No, he's getting target volume, really valuable downfield target volume that's leading to strong efficiency, 77th percentile in yards per hour in this year. So I think he's very clearly the number 2 ahead of Pitts. Pitts Pitt's still just a 10% first read target rate, which is pretty weak compared to 16% for Mooney, compared to an elite 23% for London. But yeah, I'm kind of intrigued by the Falcons' passing game here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm overweight on both Pitts, or excuse me, not Pitts, London and Mooney. I've got 12% of both of them. I've only got like 3% Kyle Pitts, and I took him in. I think I have like a Drake London, Kirk Cousins, Kyle Pitts onslaught there with Alvin Kamara as the catches a million passes to try and come back in a futile attempt. But yeah, definitely like. I think the price on both of the Atlanta guys that I like, Mooney and London, is pretty good right now. London has been sliding more now than he was at the beginning of the week, which is weird because at the beginning of the week, I was, a hip pointer can definitely take a guy out for 2 weeks, but the fact that he was practicing and limited in practice, that's a pretty bullish signal to me, relative to the range of outcomes there where he's just missing a couple weeks or he's potentially going to play this week. It seems like things are trending up for London and the market has been acting like they're trending down. So that's a spot where I want to take advantage of that. Mooney has been one where I think people are, for the most part, on top of it. He goes, I think, not even that far apart from London. They go pretty close to each other.
Well, that seems too bullish.
Yeah. So
I understand that the hip injury and everything.
London has an ADP of 26.3. Mooney has an ADP of 28. The latest Mooney has gone is 41. The latest London has gone is 36. And I saw London go at 33 today and 30. So he's closer to that, the back end of where he's been going as of late. So I'm attacking London more right now. I still want to get Mooney. I think it's a good spot. I mean, the receivers that are going after him, like, you tell me, are any of these guys that you would take? Well, I guess Josh Downs, like, I think we both are taking him ahead of Mooney, right?
Yeah.
Brian Thomas?
I would take Mooney.
Lab McConkey?
I would take Mooney.
Yeah. Marvin Harrison?
I would take Mooney.
Jordan Addison, yeah, everyone from here on down is like pretty clearly Mooney. So Mooney not all that mispriced, I think, just like maybe a couple picks mispriced. So I think London is the sharpest way to attack it right now. In the Magic universe where London like snaps his fingers and is fully healthy on Sunday, like, oh my God, he'd be a early second round, late first round pick. Like he'd probably go ahead of CeeDee Lamb. So.
He would. He'd go ahead of CeeDee Lamb for sure.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. What a world. But I get it. I wouldn't argue. I just sit back in amazement. All right, I think that covers everything. It's mentioned playoff best ball stuff. Anything you want to say on the playoff best ball stuff to kind of close us out here, though?
Yeah, we've made some improvements from the tool that we had last year. Last year, I mean, I was surprised that we were able to get that out to people. To be honest, it was a pretty quick turnaround for what we had. But it is probably my favorite fantasy format. It's the one where I feel like I have one of, if not the largest edges out of all the games that I play. I definitely hurt my edge putting out the article that I did last year on Legendary Upside. People were playing so badly.
Yeah.
And a lot of people.
You hurt your edge a lot.
Yeah, I really did. I think we messed up by only selling that for $10 a month. That was a pretty big mistake.
I like to think it was kind of showing what we could do because a lot of subscribers had quite a bit of success last year with the playoff best ball stuff. So it will be. It's the sidekick tier now, that tool, but not the content. We're gonna have playoff best ball content on the regular Legendary Upside tier, but sidekick subscribers are now the only ones who are going to have access to that tool because it's the sidekick. The tool is now the sidekick.
Yeah, I would say if you're going to play playoff best ball for any amount of volume, like I'd say over $1,000. The sidekick is like almost a must-have. Like if you're drafting without the sidekick for over $1,000 in action, you're probably just leaving. Like you could read the article that I wrote last year, which is the evergreen piece of content, and I'm sure we'll have more written content.
We'll get that. We'll get some kind of updated version, or I'll maybe just republish it to get it back out there. Yeah.
Yeah. You could read that and watch all of our content this year, and ask questions in the Discord, and we can teach you to be a pretty good playoff best ball player. I don't think that as an individual human, anyone can get to be as good as the sidekick is, just because there are some things that humans can't do. It's really hard to do things at a frequency. If you're trying to play something at an optimal rate, knowing like I should be doing this 28% of the time, like I guess you could write it, track all your teams and write them down and make sure that you're doing it at that optimal frequency. But it's pretty hard to actually execute that as a human, and harder still if you're trying to do that over a very large number of teams. For me, like the thing that I'm most looking forward to for playoff best ball this year is being able to multi-table, because in the past I really was not able to do that because I had to pay quite a bit of attention to do all of like the game tree thinking through and like reading the room, where I think the sidekick is going to help pretty substantially with that. And I feel
just like, what if people are like newer, didn't play last year, what's like the 30-second elevator pitch on playoff best ball? Not a pitch, I guess, but just like the high level overview of like what makes this game different and what gives us an edge in it.
So in normal best ball, when your opponent makes a mistake, if you're in a best ball mania team, for example, and assume that he's only losing to the rake, so he's like, his EV for every team is like what, $23 or something, right? When he makes a mistake in normal best ball, his EV maybe goes to $22.75 or $22.50. It's really hard to make a mistake large enough in normal best ball to actually tank your EV. In playoff best ball, if someone makes a mistake, they can have a team that has a 0.0% probability of winning the tournament, literally dead on arrival. That's what I like the most. I want, when my opponents mess up, I want them to be maximally punished. I want to take all their money when they mess up. I don't want to just take a little bit of it. And that's what happens in playoff best ball. And 2 years ago, there was greater than 20% of the field that was drafting dead on arrival teams that literally had a 0% probability to win the tournament. And last year, just observationally, it was still pretty close to that. I definitely think the field improved, but I would be surprised if it was lower than 20% of the field that was drafting straight up dead teams. So it's one of the best edges you can get. It's also really fun. And if you're trying to play best ball with the intention of profiting, but you're keeping your money tied up, from as early as like the springtime all the way through January, it's a lot nicer.
That's true. There's a tighter turnaround here.
Yeah, it's a lot nicer to only tie your money up for a couple months and then get it back. So yeah, playoff best ball is.
I think it's a very fun form of best ball because you're betting on specific trees of the playoff. So it's kind of like filling out a playoff bracket where you're betting on at least what the conference championship games are going to be, if not what the Super Bowl is going to be. And so you get to live in these worlds. And this is kind of in all of these games. I like to kind of, I'm now entering a world in which this happens. And in that world, what is some other things that exist? It's kind of like you go, like you take one step into the future and you look around and you say, what is this? What does the future look like now that I know this thing is happening? Now that I know the Bills are making the Super Bowl, what else does that mean? And so it's a very fun kind of way to build a team. And they're quick. They're very, very quick. So you can kind of, you do that version of the future, then you do another version of the future, and you do another version of the future. So that's one reason I think it's so fun, because it's not just about drafting the right players. You're drafting specifically who's going to make the Super Bowl, because the final round is the Super Bowl. You need to score points in the Super Bowl. You need to have players who are actually in that game. So you need to predict who's actually going to make that game in the first place, which is one of the reasons I find it so fun. It's kind of combining two different types of predictions, team level predictions and player level predictions. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. We'll do a whole pod on this, I'm sure, coming up. So look out for that. Look out for the content that we're going to have on the site. We'll be back here, if not before, but we'll be back here to talk through week 11 next Friday. Good luck in week 10. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you then.